the Sustainability Management Master's Program, you're answering one simple question. Do you care about your future generation? If you care about your kids, their grandkids, then you care about sustainability. And a sustainability manager is someone who has the tools to make people understand how they can contribute towards developing a sustainable world. We have both part-time and full-time students. Our curriculum is 30 hours. Instead of thesis, we have a research project course and a seminar course which provides them with the kind of research background they will need to be successful in their job. But at the same time, sustainability is not always everything about environment. It also relates to the business. They will take a sustainable business strategies course. They will take a project management course. Most of these courses are going to be taught by industry people, the people who are doing sustainability on a daily basis as a part of their job. Any organization that has a large number of employees and has a physical infrastructure, they will have to have a sustainability office. If you have the passion to develop and maintain a sustainable world, come to us and we will help you shape your passion into a career which will create an impact.
The Stevens Institute of Technology is proud to present the Hugo New and Geocentric Consultants Hugo New Corporation Sustainability Seminar Series, co-sponsored by Brown & Caldwell, H2M Architect and Engineers, BEM Systems, Catalyst Group, and WSP.
Thank you very much, Dibs, and also Samir, for all the great work that you're doing and for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be a part of the Stevens Institute series. And as you can see on the slide here, I want to thank all the sponsors for helping to put this together and to make this happen and to continue this series. I think it's incredibly important. I know I've attended many of the webinars already myself. So I'm very excited to be here and be a part of this. And I hope that I can share some of my knowledge with I know this is mainly aimed toward graduate students from Stevens, but it's also open to the public. So I try to put together a presentation that would address both of those audiences in a meaningful and purposeful way. And I hope that that is the case. But please, I'm going to go through a presentation for about 45 minutes, and then I hope to have enough time for questions and answers, and then we're going to have a breakout session at the very end. So if there are some slides that I go through rather quickly, or if there's some information that you'd like to hear more about, there will be time at the end to go back and to talk about those things in more detail. I'm going to try to stay on time, so you have to forgive me if I go through a slide a little quicker than you might like, or there's some information there. My understanding is that all this will be recorded and available on YouTube, so you can always go back and refer to it, and I will have my contact information on the last slide. You can contact me as well if you have any questions or any information. My purpose here is to be helpful and to guide these students forward into the environmental industry. So I hope to be as helpful as possible. And thanks again to all the sponsors that are involved in this series. So again, welcome to this talk. I've called this talk Applying Sustainability Best Practices. And again, my name is James Snook, but I like to go by Jamie, so please call me that. And I'm a PhD candidate in sustainability. I want to thank Dibs for that great introduction. I'm going to just hit it real quick. Again, he did a great job. I put this again in a slide so you can refer to it at your own convenience. But I've got 20 years of experience in the environmental consulting world in the northeastern U.S. That's a bit my greatest amount of experience, and really where all these other experiences come from. I've over 10 years been working in brownfields, public and private sector brownfields, raising grant money, but also doing the site remediation cleanup sites that are small, all the way up to 750-acre sites on waterfronts. I've worked over 10 years as a professional geologist, mainly focusing on, remediation, but also focusing a lot of time in modeling, fate and transport modeling, using geologic values and doing subsurface modeling with especially under my first master's degree, which was in hydrogeology, which is focusing on the cleanup of groundwater contamination. After 10 years of work, I qualified to become a licensed site remediation professional in the state of New Jersey, which required not only an exam, but also client recommendations, and was a real challenging position to hold in the state of New Jersey, because you are both private sector consultant and public sector state employee at the same time. You're doing both things at the same time. And then finally, as Dibs mentioned, over the last 6 years, I've been advocating very strongly for the use of a sustainability guide called the ASTM Greener Cleanup Guide. And we're going to go through that in this presentation later. So as Dibs mentioned, here's a real quick academic background, nonprofit background, and my licenses. I just want to mention that I started this journey in college back in 1990, environmental science. Then my first master's degree was really in underground groundwater studies and fate and transport of groundwater contaminations. Then I went on, as you will, many of these students, once you're employed, you must continue your education credits as a professional. So for the next 20 years, I was taking classes continuously around each year to keep up my skill set in site remediation. But then, as I'll explain, after I got a call to action in climate change, I've really devoted my time over the last 4 years to environmental studies, which are focused on hydrology, which is water above ground, ecology, biology. And so I've really been trying to understand below ground, above ground. And then over the last years, I'm trying to be able to teach that to as many students as possible. As Dibs mentioned, I've been really focusing, I've been very active in a nonprofit organization called BCONE, the Brownfield Coalition of the Northeast. I've been on the board, I've been an officer, liaison for the New England states at this time. So I'm essentially acting as a DEI officer, where I'm trying to make sure that as many people as possible are included with the opportunity to work with that nonprofit. And then again, a professional geology license, and it's also this licensed site remediation professional license. Now, I'm currently deactivated for that license while I'm pursuing a PhD. So I'm not going to go into that license in great detail. I'm really not supposed to, but I do want to mention that I have that as a credential so that you understand my position now and my background. So let's really get into the problem of sustainability. What is sustainability? Why is it an issue? Why are we have a series? There is an urgent global problem that has been recognized regarding sustainability and resiliency. The Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, the IPCC. Hopefully all of you are familiar with this at this point, but it is an independent agency that has gone to great lengths to bring climate information to us in an independent form. And what they've done is put a timeline, an urgent timeline from 2020 to 2030 for leadership on environmental issues, specifically when it comes to climate change and global warming, and trying to keep the amount of temperature increase to a minimum. And one of the main ways to do that is, in this decade, they've named it the decade of ecological restoration. As you can imagine, one of the best ways to reduce climate is to improve our ecology, the status of our ecology worldwide. So the United Nations put together sustainability development goals. They've got 17 goals at this time that together address all of these different things. And it's really a method to how you want to approach your practices and being able to especially explain how and what you're doing with your sustainability practices. So when I first read the IPCC report, I felt it was a call to action myself. And as Dibs mentioned, I started to put together a website called snooksolutionscom. It's there at the bottom. I believe it's in the chat as well. And one of the things you can do is go through and read through the navigation bar there. I believe it's under sustainability education. There are these different pages that give you an executive summary. They talk about the climate science. I give you a summary of the reports. I talk about the Paris Agreement that comes out of the reports. Then the brand new 2019 special report from IPCC, some of my conclusions and references. So this can bring you up to speed if you're not familiar with it very quickly if you go on the website. And I hope that is helpful to you. Once again, what I wanted to do here was just quickly, this is a long slide, but I wanted to show you that over the last 4 years, I've been studying a lot of topics that are considered to be young sciences that are involved in the topic of sustainability. For example, my master's degree in environmental studies, you've got ecological restoration as a class, natural systems ecology, conservation biology, sustainability. These are young sciences, new sciences. And then in the PhD program, a lot of the social justice teaching programs and guidance through, but also climate change, climate advocacy, understanding economics of sustainable organization. Another big topic is leadership, understanding situation and transformational leadership. These are new type of topics and classes that I've been studying, which are really interesting, and I hope that I think that they're going to become more the norm as we go forward. So I wanted to bring them forward to you. Hopefully you're all familiar with these concepts of sustainability, but in case the public is watching, I want to make sure to bring this forward first and get this grounded. Sustainability was first brought forward in 1924. It's basically living a lifestyle that can be sustained, right? Through applying methods of using resources carefully so that you don't permanently damage your resources and therefore affect your sustainability. Now, the United Nations, as I've shown, has been very involved in this for a long time. They put together a Brundtland Commission, which released a report called Our Common Future. And they were the first ones that really tried to put a serious definition on sustainability. And they said that sustainable development is development that meets the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. All right. Now, there's 300 concepts of sustainability. That's why it's a young science. But there is a common focus. I want to bring this forward. If there is something that, in order to understand the challenge of sustainability, is to move from a bottom line approach to business and other things and move to a triple bottom line. In the triple bottom line, people, the planet, are just as equally important as profit, or at least must be considered along with profit. Whereas in a bottom line approach to business, profit is the bottom line. That ultimately makes the decisions. Whereas when you're dealing in a triple bottom line, you must take people, planet, and the United Nations is asking us to put sustainable development also as one of the 4 main attributes of your decision making. And that is a real change. Okay, so let's talk about sustainability and resiliency. These are 2 topics that are interrelated. They really should be talked about together. This presentation is going to focus on sustainability. I've already given several workshops and been involved in workshops that are focused on resiliency. That's a really hot topic right now, as you can imagine. Resiliency is, well, let's quick talk about that. Sustainability is really the practice of reducing, right, or eliminating impact. And also, by doing that, it creates almost an everlasting type of approach. So you've got a definition over here. The sustainability paradigm would be an everlasting project, whatever you want to make last for a long time. You want to make it sustainable, you must do certain things to try to help it sustain itself, right? Well, resiliency is critical to that because you're going to have things that are going to impact your project, whatever it may be. And you must then be resilient to that impact in order to continue to sustain. Now, what I've been writing about and researching is our global change from a disposable paradigm, where you can understand we have a lot of disposability in our society. You know, we throw away an awful lot of things. A lot of things are created just for disposable use. But in a sustainability paradigm, you know, which I hope to move us to into the future, you know, be part of that future, is more of an everlasting future. And that's really why we keep reflecting on these global problems. So what we really want to try to find is this middle ground where you're both sustainable and resilient. That is the strongest approach toward a project or to what you want to accomplish. Now, there's some big concepts I just want to quickly mention. I don't want to spend too much time here. There is some text here that you can go back to and read later. But, you know, in order to address a global sustainability problem, sustainability education really comes forward, because there are just so many people, so many different backgrounds, and so many different countries, and with all different cultures. And there's a way to try to break through that, and it's called culturally responsive teaching. And that is to try to make a tangible practice in the classroom where you're actually connecting with people of all different backgrounds. And in order to do that, you really have to develop a social literacy. So that is a major aspect of an educator and others, is develop this social literacy so we can talk to each other in a really purposeful way. And when you find that you're doing that, what we're really doing is humanizing the process, right? So it's called humanization. It's really, and by doing that, I think we'll find that people that have been oppressed or that are vulnerable or those that are not participating will be humanized and may provide more participation in the process. So in doing that, you start to bring people out of the woodwork that were, you know, and you can reach a critical consciousness, which means that you can have people of all these different backgrounds actually find purpose together and be able to talk and come up with solutions to problems. And in doing that, you're essentially transcending a culture. You're not forgetting about the culture. You're not ignoring the culture. You are attempting to transcend a culture in order to solve a problem that applies to everyone, right? And one of the major leadership approaches is called, and what I'm working with is called ethical stewardship. And I'm doing a lot of research on that right now. I'll talk to some of you may be able to become involved with me on this research. But it's really when leadership rises, right, to the level of ethical stewardship, which means you've got ethics and stewardship in your leadership. And that really can develop trust with the other people that you're working with. And if you can put people together that all are using ethical stewardship toward a common goal, you can transcend culture, you can reach critical consciousness, you're going to start to see equity, access, participation, and harmony. To wrap this up, before we move on to site remediation and more of a technical aspect of the presentation, I want to talk about, this is a diagram that I put together of what I've learned through my PhD studies on understanding your positionality and it was called SelfReflexivity. In order to reach a better awareness of yourself so that you can become more purposeful with people of different backgrounds. So the first step up here at the top is, number one, become more self-aware, right? Look at yourself in the mirror, understand who you are, your personal background, where you came from. And the more you understand about your background, the more you can appreciate others. And that's called understanding and applying your positionality. And a self-reflexivity is then to say, okay, well, this is who I am, but is this the best I can be? Is this ethical? Is this, should I change? Do I need to adapt? Do I need to change in order to be a better version of myself? Right. And that's especially important if you want to have a leadership role. And then when you do that and you start to have self-reflexivity, you start to recognize other people that are struggling, that are struggling with privilege, marginalization, vulnerability in your society. You start to see other people. They become more apparent to you. And you start to really care about those other people, and you want to then have a purposeful approach to helping. Well, in order to do that, you must develop an authentic voice. And that goes back to being fully self-aware of who you are, what you're trying to accomplish. And in doing that, you can develop more of a purposeful vision, right? And then you can share that vision with other people. And when you're humanizing the process, right? So we're at number 5, we're starting to develop relationships, we're humanizing this process. And then number 6, you're able to engage the audience. And then you can actually overcome dysfunction. And I'm finding personally that in doing sustainability work, one of the things I'm recognizing is dysfunction. It's becoming more clear, more obvious to me all the time. And it's something that has to be addressed in order to create greater functionality, which will lead to sustainability. And in doing that, when you start to create creative functionality and people start to see bad habits go to good habits, greater sustainability, that leads to number 7, gaining trusting relationships. You're starting to use your leadership, you're gaining trusting relationships, you're able to grow. Number 8, a more diverse and resilient community. This is gonna, using your social literacy, transcending culture, and the status quo. And this is when things can really get purposeful and you can really be functional as a group, right? And you therefore, as a leader, you're better communicating your solutions toward that sustainability goal and resiliency. And then these best management practices really start to come into shape. So number 10, this is when you're able to really, you've got a group, you're talking to each other, you're working, it's functional. You're really able to then encourage an ethical competition, right? So you have really great people working together and you have good leadership. You can actually push each other toward finding the best, most important, the best approach, the best solution, the most purposeful solution that will help everyone. You really have a group involved. So that's where we want to get, and you're going to minimize, your problems, your challenges, and you're going to reach towards sustainability. Okay, so let's get more to the technical aspect of this. What are we doing in the United States? What are the states doing about sustainability? Well, I'm going to show you 2 states really quick. I live in Vermont at this time, but you're in New Jersey. I've got a huge background in Jersey. So those are the 2 states I'm going to show you. Very different approaches to sustainability. Vermont state is taking an approach to essentially force itself to reach sustainability goals as soon as 2025, 2030, 2050. And it's going to allow individuals to sue the state if it doesn't reach its own goals. Very interesting approach. I put down here at the bottom of this slide, I do have 3 different sites on my website that give Vermont climate policy in more detail. I live in the Rutland County region, so I do an analysis of the Rutland region, and then I also talk about Rutland's resiliency solutions. So go to that in your own free time if you get a chance. Now, New Jersey is taking a very different approach where they want to also reduce greenhouse gas emissions, but what they've done is they've licensed environmental consultants that they feel are the gold standard of consulting in New Jersey, called licensed site remediation professionals. And I put together this formula. It's not exact. This is not a state formula. This is what I'm seeing the state do, which essentially licensing individuals to be transformational leaders, right, in the state that have incredible responsibility for a code of ethics. And in the future, we'll have sustainability, environmental justice requirements, responsibilities. So the future formula is the LSRP adds green and sustainable remediation with their best practices, including environmental justice. And that is going to be a calculation that can lead to more sustainable, equitable, and permanent solutions. So if we really want to apply sustainability best practices, okay, we can do that under the United Nations Ecological Restoration Decade. So for you in class right now and you're moving into the industry, if you're working in site remediation, you're working in green infrastructure, you're working in brownfield transformation, that is all considered part of ecological restoration in the greater scheme of things. So you are on the right track. You are involved actively in solutions towards global sustainability, right? And you can read this for yourself, but these are a couple quotes that bring that home. Now, here's the challenge. Even though we are cleaning up contamination and we're changing brownfields from blighted sites to reuse, okay, there's still a need for reduction in this work, in site remediation, in green infrastructure, in applying sustainability, as a consultant. We are going to be using materials and having waste. We're going to be, land and ecosystem. These are the core elements that the US EPA has identified as how will cause an environmental footprint, right? So even though we've got a good project, we're doing great work, we still have an environmental footprint. So how do we minimize that, right? There's a couple major ways to do that. And this is what as a student, I would recommend you take a look at these for the future. There's two main approaches. One is called an ASTM approach, which is an industry standard. It's the American Society for Testing Materials. And this has been guided by the EPA through a stakeholder approach. Okay, and I've read this and applied this and been advocating for this over the last 6 years. There's really two guides. The one we're going to talk about in detail is the Standard Guide to Greener Cleanups. Now, there's a newer one that's really been taking shape in New Jersey. My understanding is using both of these in combination or one or the other. And this is an interstate council, regulatory technology council. And they've come out with, in 2021, just came out with Sustainable Resilient Remediation Guidance. We're not going to talk about that one today, but I recommend you take a look at that. That is definitely going to be used throughout the future in site cleanup. So the Guide to Greener Cleanups, right? What are we trying to do here? We're trying to minimize the environmental footprint while we do our work. Well, these are some of the, while we do our site cleanup work. Well, these are some of the things we've got to be aware of. Emissions, nitrous oxide. You've got material use, water use, you've got waste generation, carbon dioxide, energy use, right? Sulfur dioxide. What the Standard Guide for Greener Cleanup does is it supports the principles. What's great about this guide is that you can use it in any phase of your project. You can use it on any project. You can use it. So it's really flexible. It's really adaptable. And it offers a lot of transparency for the practices that you're putting in place, because you can end up with a report. But the most important thing, it works at any site in any phase of any site. So again, real quickly, if you're doing a due diligence of a project and you're doing a federal clean, you're going under the federal system, you do a phase 1, a phase 2, a phase 3, you could apply it in that. Now, if you're in New Jersey and you're going through the regulatory system and trying to get a state closure, you're doing a preliminary assessment, site investigation, remedial investigation, right? Remedial action. It can be applied to all these steps as well. So if you go into the guide and you want to use it, what you do is you look at these categories, okay? And I've listed the categories here. these are the main categories where you're going to be using it, energy and other things that will cause an environmental footprint. So you've got buildings, materials, power and fuel, project planning and team management, soil and liquid waste, sampling analysis, right? Wastewater, vehicle and equipment. So you look up your categories and you say, okay, I need to try to lower my environmental footprint in these categories. Then you look over here at your core elements and you look at your best management practices. On the next page, I'll show you the technologies. And then you scroll down through and there's pages and pages and pages of practices. I believe there's 180 best management practices. You scroll down and you figure out which one of these practices can be applied to your project. And you go through that first and you do a brainstorm. Can I apply any of these? And you click the box and you get your check boxes. Then you go back through, and what I love about this guide is that you go back through and determine if these approaches are going to be cost effective or cost prohibitive. And you do not have to choose a practice that is going to be costly, right? So if it's too costly, then you can actually disregard that practice. So what's great about this is not only does it give you the practices, but then you get to choose cost-effective practices, right? And that's something that really has to be done in order to have a sustainable project, right? If you go over budget and you choose the most expensive practices, your project may not be sustainable, right? Going through the best management process is what I just mentioned. So you first want to do an assessment. What practices can I use? Then you prioritize them. Then you select them. Then you can implement them, right? And then you can finally end up with a document. You can actually come out with a document using the guide. And these are just some examples down here of what are the type of practices you may need to use. And it shows you, it depends where you are. It depends what your project is. It depends what your setting is on which practices you ultimately may choose. I wanted to show you some of the remedial technologies. Again, you have to check off the boxes. So you only get to choose so many different remedial technologies to apply. But you can see these are the most common remedial technologies that are being used in site remediation. So in that spreadsheet, it gives you a lot of different combinations of how to reduce your footprint. Okay, so we're getting near to the end of the program here. And really what we're talking about now is where is this going to go in the future, right? So how are we going to be able to apply this in the future? What are we going to see? What are we expecting to see, especially in site remediation? Well, I think we're going to see more of this. And we're, as you can imagine, with the crisis in Ukraine, we're seeing skyrocketing fuel prices. So there may be a real push, a real demand for minimizing the use of energy at this time. So we're likely to see sustainability, not only from the government, from the state and the federal governments asking and requesting for this, but we may actually see a private sector demand for this as well, minimizing emissions, minimizing the use of, especially virgin material, right? There's only so much of that available, especially in New Jersey. Promoting water efficiency, right? Preserving your green space, right? Through reuse, right? Engaging your communities, like we talked about before, using sustainability education, and environmental justice, right? Monitor your controls, monitor it. If you're not monitoring your project, then you're not going to be resilient, especially economically. Promote the use of renewable energy, right? That is definitely going to lower your carbon footprint, your environmental footprint. Minimize your waste generation. Minimize your habitat disturbance. You want to clean up to reasonably anticipated land use. So you want to make sure you have a really good end use, right? For your project. Provide employment. So these again, this is like a triple bottom line approach, and we should expect to see this more and more in regulations, and also in the private sector. We should start to see this more as sustainability enters the private sector in practice in the private sector more. We should expect to see those things reach that triple bottom line. Well, I want to thank you again for this opportunity, for this presentation. I may have gone through it a little bit quicker than I anticipated, so I can always go back through some slides. But I am going to spend just a minute or two here explaining an introduction to my dissertation and asking for the students and anyone else who's watching to become involved in my dissertation. I am currently working on an educational tool that I hope that will include information and responses to questions from professionals and students from various sectors. So what I'm currently working with, consultants, regulators, state officials, anyone who's working in sustainability in a professional manner. But what I'm trying to do is open it up to students and also the public. So if you're interested in an interview where you would answer some questions, and that those questions may lead to the development of an educational tool that will assist situation and transformational leaders with making good decisions. What I'm really trying to do, and I hope to have your help to do so, is help people that are trying to lead in sustainability make faster, smarter, better decisions that are also transparent. And I believe that I'm trying to create an educational tool, or a cipher, if you will, that will help to get right to the crux of the decision making, and will help leaders who are moving through this urgent timeline to be able to document their decisions in such a way to help them and others understand the decisions that you make. As you can imagine, in sustainability, it's a challenge to make these decisions. Not all of sustainability decisions are going to be appreciated by all parties. In many cases, sustainability practices are expected to cause extra cost, right? They're expected to cost more because of the triple bottom line. So there's going to need to be a real communication and justification for the use of these practices, and an educational component to bring a lot of people along as we apply sustainability in real life and tangibly toward purposeful ends. And what I'm hoping is that if you could, email me, let me know you're interested in taking part in the dissertation, and then I'll be asking you questions about how I can better develop this educational tool that will ultimately lead to better decisions in this world of sustainability. I know I'm a little bit early, but I think I'm going to reach out to Dibs and see if I can start the question and answer.
Thanks, Jamie. That was a very nice presentation. And those of you who want to help Jamie with this survey or the interview, you can either speak up in the form of writing a note in the chat saying that I'm available, or once we start the breakout room, you can actually get a chance to talk to him one-on-one and let him know that you are glad to help. So now it's time for questions, and if you have questions, raise your electronic hand and I'm going to call you in the order of the hands received.